first question is, in your book, you talk about the ability to handle conflict as one of the skills related to power, and how workplace bullying is so prevalent today in the corporate world simply because it is effective. Do you think that most people that have attained power are sort of bullies?
Well, I think most people who obtain power, I'm not sure they're bullies, but I think most people who hold on to power are not overly concerned about what everybody else thinks about them. I'm not sure that's exactly the same thing as bullies. I think most people, and I think this is true for corporate CEOs as well, I think one word, I mean, you use the word bullying, I would use a different word. The word I would use is tough. I think that people who rise up in the corporate ladder and certainly hold senior level positions, either in the non-profit and the governments in the for-profit sector, are tough. They're focused on achieving their objectives, and they're not too concerned about what everybody else thinks about them.
Great. Now let's talk about for a second the golden rule. Now, it seems that do unto others as you want others to do unto you isn't necessarily the case. It seems that if you're super nice, people tend to walk all over you a lot of times, and if you're mean and shrewd, people tend to maybe respect you a bit more and try a little harder to win you over. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's probably. Well, I think there's another phenomenon. I think what you said is probably correct. I think there's another phenomenon. I mean, the literature, the large social psychological literature on person perception suggests that the two fundamental dimensions by which we assess other people are warmth or niceness or whatever, and competence or ability to our smartness on the other hand. And even though empirically you can be both nice and smart, people tend to perceive those traits as negatively correlated. So Amy J.C. Cuddy, a psychologist at Harvard, wrote an article in Harvard Business Review entitled "Just Because I'm Nice, Don't Think I'm Dumb."
Right.
And so I think that really goes to the other phenomenon, which is if you act in a tough way, people will tend, or if you're critical of other people, if you're not as warm, people will tend to think you're smarter, more competent.
Wow. Okay. Now, looking at these people who attain great power, like, say, Napoleon Bonaparte or Julius Caesar, how many of the underlying principles that worked for them do you think are applicable in the corporate world?
100%. And by the way, not only would I say that they're applicable in terms of, across sectors, but they're also applicable, I think, over time. Because the fundamental, I think a lot of our responses to behavior is hardwired into us from our, basic survival instincts. So I think people want to be on the side of winners. And so one of the things I'm going to do as I assess is figure out whether or not you're going to win. One of the ways I'm going to figure out whether or not you're going to win is, are you tough enough and determined enough, ambitious enough, with enough drive. And then because people want to be associated with winners, not with losers. They want to be on the side of people who are going to be successful, not on those who are not going to be successful.
Right, okay. Do you have a main inspiration that you draw upon when writing about power?
No, just all of the social science literature.
Right, okay. Another question, this might find this question a little bit odd, but looking at, say, like Pablo Escobar or Carlo Gambino, people who have attained power in an incredibly ruthless, sort of very negative way, do you think that there's anything that we could learn that would be applicable in the real non-criminal corporate world from them?
Well, I think in every world, I mean, so they take the principle I'm about to enunciate to an extreme. But I even the sweet, now deceased John Gardner, the first Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, and Lyndon Johnson, and the founder of Common Cause, would tell you that when he was running HEW on the LBJ, he would say to people, you have a right to disagree with me, and you have a right to oppose what I'm trying to do. You have to understand there will be consequences. So,
right.
I think everybody inside organizations tends to reward those who support them and punish those who oppose them. And this is true. I mean, this is just natural human behavior. So of course, these guys take it to an extreme, and the punishment is oftentimes death.
Right.
But the underlying principle of rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies is quite common.
Okay, great. My next question is, these people who have attained great fortunes and power, like Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller, it seems that they're both extremely negative and extremely positive in some ways. Andrew Carnegie is, for example, an incurable optimist, but he's also a very, very ruthless and shrewd businessman.
And John D. Rockefeller was, by repute, probably even more ruthless.
Right, absolutely. What do you think is the average ratio of positive and negative with these titans of wealth?
Well, I try not to be mental and to use phrases like positive and negative, so I try to get my students to focus on is what they do, not so much an evaluation of what they do.
Right.
But
Okay.
but if you're going to be serious about making an impact on the world, you have to be in a position of power to have that impact. And sometimes, once people attain great power and wealth, many of them become way more beneficent. So Bill Gates today is not the Bill Gates of 30 years ago, where he much more ruthless than he is today. So oftentimes, so I think there's two consequences. Number one is people attain power. Once they're in power, some of them become a little bit nicer because they've reached what they wanted to achieve.
Right.
And secondly, as they get older, they become a little nicer because they're more concerned about their legacy.
Absolutely.
And I think that's true for Rockefeller, and I think that's true for Carnegie as well. I mean, after all, Andrew Carnegie, after accumulating all this money, then founded Carnegie Mellon University, except it was called Carnegie Institute of Technology in those days, and also made a big contribution to the library system.
Right.
And he was very generous with the money he had attained. So I think you get an effect of both achieving your goals, number one, and number two, I think you get an effect of as you get older, you worry more about the legacy and how people are going to remember you.
Absolutely. Okay. In your book, Power: Why Some People Have It and Some People Don't, you talk about how making others above you feel better about themselves and like you, right? What do you think some of the most effective techniques are to do so? Do you recommend like personality mirroring?
Yeah, well, you want to mirror their behavior, you want to flatter them,
Right.
and not just personality mirroring, but actually mirroring their speech patterns.
Wow.
I think in the New Times there was a famous article which summarized a lot of this research called "You Remind Me of Me," which indicates that mirroring people's behaviors and patterns of speech is a good way. But the simplest way is just to flatter your boss and to agree with that individual.
Okay.
And
Great.
certainly not to criticize them.
Right, absolutely. Okay. In terms of the ability to handle conflict that you talked about in your book, so being very, you talk about it's better to be forceful than remorseful, right?
Yep.
Is it a delicate art to sort of being forceful, or is it sort of not too much?
Of course. No, I think you're completely correct.
Okay.
I mean, it's like chemicals in the body.
Right.
If you have no salt, you'll die, and if you have too much salt is a poison.
Right.